It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guests are Gloria Calderon Kellett and Mike Royce. They're the co-creators of One Day at a Time. We talked last year. The show is a reboot of the classic Norman Lear sitcom from 1975. Gloria and Mike collaborated with Lear on the concept of the show, what kind of family to focus on, how to translate jokes and bits that are now more than 30 years old. And the end result is a show that captures Norman Lear's spirit pretty perfectly. It's sincere, but it has a bite, too. It takes an old standby format, multi-camera sitcoms, and turns it into a reflection of our world today, one that is diverse, a little messy, and really funny. The show centers around a three-generation Cuban-American family living in the same home. Penelope, played by Justina Machado, is the main character. She's a mom and a veteran. She works as a nurse and lives with her two kids and her mom, played by the amazing Rita Moreno. In this scene from the show's first season, Penelope's teenage daughter just broke the news to her mom and grandma that she doesn't want to have a quinceañera.
And this one, I don't like her anymore.
I don't care if you like me. Sounds like you're both on the same page.
Your daughter does not want to have a quinces.
What? What? We already booked the room, and I found a great band. Okay, it's a DJ. Okay, it's your brother with an iPod and a playlist, but it's a very good playlist.
I researched the history of quinceañeras and found out they're totally misogynistic.
She's been reading again. Why do you let her read?
I know, Mommy. I let her do math, too. I'm a monster.
Gloria, Mike, welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Did you just get like a call from Norman Lear saying, hi, this is the most powerful comedy producer in television history?
Kinda. Yes. I was coming out of a spin class. I like to say that because I go twice a year and I kind of want credit for having gone that one time. And my agent said, you know, Norman would like to have lunch with you. And I was like, what? Okay. Like, what do you say? Okay.
Like, you didn't know him or?
No. So I went in and he's incredibly disarming and the rest is history.
What about you, Mike? How did you get on board this train?
Oh, I just want to point out I did not get lunch. I'm realizing that as you tell your story. And yeah, they had a meeting with me. I was, nominally available, and it was the same kind of thing. Very daunting. We're thinking about doing this reboot, and to have anything to do with Norman's shows and somehow, trying to take an existing Norman show and somehow rethink it was like crazy. Once they were talking about, okay, it's really, we just want to do a new show with the same premise, then my brain started percolating a lot. But it was, it's still, for a long time, just how would that's, people are going to be comparing this. And so it was a great challenge, but it was very, alarming at first.
Did you have memories or feelings about the Norman Lear sitcoms of the era when Norman Lear had was like 5 of the top 10 shows on television? Or was that just something that had passed from your mind or never entered it?
I'm really young. Mike is an old man.
Uh-huh.
The viewers
true,
should just know the truth.
Yeah.
No, I was the original. I'm not that young, sadly. The original came out in '75, which is when I was born. So that all kind of bypassed me. I learned about All in the Family when I was in my 20s and just wanted to find out. So I went to the Paley, now the Paley Center, what was the Museum of TV and Radio, and I would spend hours watching a bunch of old shows and kind of teaching myself television. But I feel both like I was robbed that I didn't get to experience it in real time, and also a little bit grateful because I think it would have been so much more daunting for me had I known.
Yeah.
When I was.
It's such a, I do remember, even though I was young, I wasn't allowed to watch All in the Family because I was too young. I certainly watched most of the other shows. But so then rewatching a little bit as we're preparing for the show, not just All in the Family, not just One Day at a Time, but All in the Family and the other ones as well. I really was struck by when you're a young kid, you don't pay attention to the emotional parts as much, especially when they're adult issues. And I think that's really where we live, just separately, Gloria and I, creatively. On the other shows we've done, that's what we love, funny stuff that then leads to some dramatic stuff. And I was really struck by how much, Norman is, boy, does, those shows wear their heart on their sleeve. And I can't even get into it. I'm going to cry while I'm like describing it, so I'm just going to stare at the wall here and try to get through it. But, there's a scene where I think it's after Gloria has a miscarriage, if I'm not mistaken. She's in the hospital and Archie is comforting her. And he's there, and of course he's just awkward and doesn't know what to say. And I think she says something like, I can't remember. I'm mixing up scenes, but like that was a super emotional scene. And there's a part where she says, "I'm not your little girl anymore," and he says, "Don't you ever say that." And it's like this really, I think the term now is kitchen sink drama, but it was really powerful. And those when you're a kid, you're like, where's the funny part?
Well, I mean, I think that the last 25 years of the television sitcom have sort of self-consciously moved away from those values, which became, in some ways, self-parodic in the 80s. I mean, if you think of like what's the top thing you could complain about in 1994, it's a very special episode of something, right? Mm-hmm. That feeling like we have to have feelings in our sitcoms and we're visiting. And what's the greatest sitcom of the 90s is Seinfeld, and it's a show that is explicitly about the opposite of that. That how can we lower the stakes as much as possible and then amplify the stakes on the least important thing ever, right?
And no hugging.
Right, exactly. And I wonder like how it's different to write that kind of material, write material that wears its heart on its sleeve after 20 or 25 years of people running away from that as fast as they can for the most part.
I mean, it's just it's a weird thing because this is what we've been writing anyway, so it doesn't feel like we just started writing this. It feels like this is always what we've been writing, and as a playwright, this is what I've been writing for the last 10 years too. So it just feels like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I get to do this at work now instead of for free. I'm glad somebody is paying me now to do this stuff and to write in this way because it's what I like, and that's not always what's in vogue. There are definitely shows I worked on where no feelings would have. You don't pitch feelings. It's how many jokes can I think up right now, and that's great too, and that was fun too. But it wasn't. I think it's just we continued to do the thing that we love doing, and thankfully.
No, that's right. It's. I mean, to your point, it's when the Seinfeld came out. I mean, even Raymond that I worked on at the time was considered against the grain, just because every show wanted to be Seinfeld and still continues to want to be Seinfeld for a good reason. It's a fantastic
it's a great show.
But
I'm rewatching it right now, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No, my son is getting it.
It's amazing. So good.
It's amazing that it has
even
not
the
really.
pilot is really good.
Yeah.
I forgot. It's so good.
It's funny if you watch the pilot because at the end, if you watch the DVD commentary, at the end as it's fading out, Jerry Seinfeld says, "Well, that was like watching a school play." Like, he's so upset at the pacing.
Oh my God, I think
stuff.
it's great. I thought it was so great.
Yeah.
Gloria, when you got this job, when Mike got this job, he can always just cop out and say, "Look, I'm just a hired sitcom hack." You know what I mean? Like
I've done it before.
I'm just there to say, let's close that beat with a laugh or whatever it is that sitcom writers say to each other, right? You are the Cuban-American woman who got the Cuban-American sitcom.
Yeah.
Did that come with like a series of responsibilities?
Of wild anxiety? Yes, it did. Of course. Of course it did. Also, not even just that. I mean, the Latinx community, I know was also watching and also wanting something. And so I felt a responsibility to them to be specific to my experience so that they would say, yeah, she got it right. And I feel that resonated with me. And I'm not, that was the response I had been hoping for in the vision board in my mind, was that we would get that type of feedback. So yeah, this is. I was prepared for the hate, and have so far it's been pretty.
It's the opposite.
Warm.
Come on.
Yeah, it's been a big hug. Yeah, it's been a big hug.
Did you get like story ideas from every Cuban American person on earth? Like, did Jose Canseco send you a note
Not yet.
that said,
I can't wait for all the Cubans to reach out. She says, terrified.
There's been a lot on Twitter and stuff.
Yes,
people,
now
right?
on Twitter.
Yeah.
On Twitter, people are reaching out. But I have just so. There's so much from my actual family. So we haven't, talk to me in season 5. but it's unreal. It's unreal.
Gloria, I don't want to put you too deep on the spot, but
Go ahead.
What's something that came out of your own family experience that found its way onto
On the
screen?
show? Oh my God.
The
quinceañeras. I did not have a quinceañera. I was the first cousin in my family not to. That was the story I told Norman in our first meeting. I feel bad about it now, but at the time I had been reading about it, and I just thought, what? They'd literally dress you up and be like, all right, she got a period at 12 and now she's a woman, and who wants her in the village? Let's dress her up, put some lipstick on this pig and put her out there. Who wants her? And I was like, what? And now it's obviously not that. But the fact that it had roots in that, I was like, no, I won't do it. I want a car. And look, I also saw my parents are incredible hard workers. I saw how much went into my cousin's beautiful quinceañeras, and they're like a wedding. People really go into debt to put these things on for their kids. I knew I wanted to go to college, and that was much more important to me. And so I just said, I don't want you to spend the money either. And they were like, okay, and respectful, and I promised them a big Catholic wedding in a church, and I did it. I gave it to them. Get off my back. So that I told Norman that story, and he was like, "That's great." And then I told Mike that story, and he was like, "That's my daughter."
Well, if my daughter was Cuban, that would exactly be what she did. Yes.
But after that, none of my other cousins had quinceañeras, and I broke this weird tradition, and now I kind of want my daughter. I have an 8-year-old. I kind of want her to have a quinces because I think it would be kind of nice. Also because she's half. My husband is Irish, English, Polish. And so I want her to remember her Cuban side. I want that to, I'm now more Cuban than ever, holding up the flags and whatnot, because I don't want my kids to lose any of the cultural specificity.
Was there a part of your professional career, Gloria, where you felt like you had to move away from your Cubanness?
Yes! She says too loud. My very first show I was on, Quintuplets, for Fox, Andy Richter. I was on that show as the diversity hire. You get to do that once. Some people, if you're diverse, which I am female, and I check 2 boxes. Mm-hmm. I'm diverse, I am Hispanic, and a female. And the moment you get in there, everybody knows you're the diversity spot. And the first thing I felt like I had to do was make them know that, no, I deserve to be here, and I'm going to show you by being exactly like you. And that is, no one told me I had to do that, but I did feel like I'm so different that if I don't assimilate here, I'm going to get eaten up. And that's what I tried to do. And it was really hard. It was hard. It was hard because you want to say, your job as a writer is to bring your experience to the table. And so when you don't have that, you do yourself a disservice. But I had nobody to tell me that. I was sitting next to there was one other woman in that room who I love, Jen Fisher. Shout out to Jen Fisher. And we would sit next to each other sometimes, and then I was pulled aside and said, women do that. They sit next to each other. You're doing yourself a disservice. But a writer did tell me that, and so I stopped sitting next to her and said we would text each other constantly, things that were happening. But
mostly Andy Richter.
So yes, he was lovely. He was lovely. But it was. Yeah, at first you want people to know that you can write these characters as well. I can write Schneider as well as he can write Penelope, and I say that because both of us, I think, can do the other really well. And so I really felt like in order to make a career for myself, and one of the big things as well that happened right after that show for me, sorry to go on a tangent, but is I got offered the George Lopez show. And I thought, as a Latina, I was like, if I take this show right now in my career as my second job, they're going to think I can just write that. And I got How I Met Your Mother at the same time at a much lower position and a lower pay scale. And I felt like I can write How I Met Your Mother at the time, too. I was, 29. So I was like, I don't know family stuff right now. I don't have kids. I dating stories and, jokes. Let's do that. Sorry. You're getting full uncut Gloria right now. And so I took How I Met Your Mother, and I do feel like by doing those shows and letting people see that I could do the range, because I know a lot of Latino writers that get caught up in they're a Latino writer, so they just write Latino jokes and perspective, and that's not true of us. So that's a very long answer. Yes is the answer. Should have just stayed with the yes.
I want to play another clip from One Day at a Time. And my guests are Gloria Calderon Kellett and Mike Royce, who are the showrunners of the program. So Rita Moreno is on the show. I had no idea she was in her 80s. Jiminy Christmas, is she?
A babe.
She's a babe, and she's working out there, too.
Yes.
She's not just standing in the corner and making a sly remark. But anyway, her character's name is Lydia. She's the grandmother on the show, and she just kind of doesn't, she's, as you would expect, you know, she's a first-generation immigrant and does not see the world the same way her daughter and granddaughter do.
Mom, this stuff might not seem like a big deal, but it chips away at you. You gotta call Scott out.
Why would I waste my time? That is right. You will never win men over by confronting them. You flirt with them. You hypnotize them. And then you do whatever the hell you want. And then they will think they are the boss, but really, you are the boss.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is what my mom believes. And my mom still has a very thick accent, and bless her, she was a businesswoman. She worked for many years they both came here when they were 15, both my parents from Cuba, and didn't get to go to college because they had to jump right in the workforce to live, to pay their bills. But my mom graduated from high school, American high school, not knowing the language at 16 because she was just really smart. The education system in Cuba is great. And just did like a trade school, a secretarial program, and then worked her way up, as did my dad. He started as a mechanic in a dealership and worked his way up to management just by sheer work and delight, because they're wonderful, wonderful people. But, you know, my mom really felt like in the business place, she would be running meetings and she'd have that thick accent and would feel like, you have to look great. I go in and I look beautiful and they are better to me. That she believed that. And so the fact that I'm a writer and dress, you know, in jeans and Converse, like, horrifies her. She just doesn't understand how I'm taken seriously at all.
Gloria, I want to ask you this. So you are, you have a template in the original One Day at a Time, but the show's characters are not that close to that. I think they probably are a lot closer to your family and maybe to some extent Mike's family. Mm-hmm. What's it like to cast actors to play the most important people in your lives?
Well, with Rita, it was very easy because Rita and my mother resemble each other. They're both 95 pounds wet and, boob popsicles, but powerhouse sort of delightful women. So I said to Norman in our first meeting when he said, "What's your mom like?" I said, "Well, picture Rita Moreno, but with red." And then I pulled out a photo, and it's funny that when Rita first wore the wig, I'd keep on set. I'd keep on being like, "Oh, my mom! Oh no, it's Rita." And then one time I was at the monitors, and she goes, "Oh, is Nandi here?" Which is her daughter Fernanda, and she runs over and it's me, and she's like, "Oh, well, I guess why? Okay." Oh, yeah, so that was Norman picks up. Norman's Willy Wonka, so you say something and he makes it happen. So it was like Rita Moreno. Oh, let's call her.
Sure, let's get her on the phone.
Sure. And I kind of thought he was joking. And then with Norman, the ambassadors and presidents are calling him all the time. So that was easy. We offered the part to Rita. She was the only one that didn't read. And that was like once we had Rita, it was like, whew, okay. All right, well, we got an EGOT. So what do people want?
Yeah.
Everyone else can just phone it in. And then
the plan had always been to get an EGOT.
Yes.
Like if Rita Moreno had said no, you would have just cast Whoopi Goldberg.
Right.
The original plan was all EGOTs, but there are no 12-year-old
Yes,
EGOTs.
it's true. And then, truthfully, Justina Machado walked in and just blew our minds.
Well, that's what I can. So we have Rita Moreno, great, and we're feeling good. And then you realize you write a whole script, and the center of the show. We really, I was having tons of anxiety. We're dead if we can't find the person who is all of these things.
Yes. Who can
funny,
play drama,
charming,
who can
badass,
be funny.
Right, emotional. So many boxes to check of skill. And then she came in. She was the first person that we saw with Norman. It was a big day. Norman Lear's casting again. It was kind of like a cool. And she comes in and she did the first scene, which was funny, and we laughed our off, and then the second she did a dramatic thing, and I'm not. I mean, I don't. But we were crying in
and
the audition.
chicken skinned. It was ridiculous what this
Yeah.
woman came in and did to us in 7 minutes.
Yes, and then she left, and Norman goes, "Oh, it's a good start." We're like, no,
No, that's her. That's her, Norman.
But to be fair, it's like it sounded okay. If that's the first one, how far do we have to go?
Right.
It must be. But of course, it was all over already.
So I want to play a clip from the show's second episode. This scene is about Penelope, who's Justina Machado's character. And like we said, she is a veteran who left the Army, works now as a nurse in a small doctor's office. And as we listen in, she just got home from work, and she's telling her daughter and her mom about a frustrating meeting she had with a male coworker she calls a bobo. Let's take a listen.
I barely got a word in before Bobo started interrupting me, talking over me. I couldn't even get my point across.
Well, that's just sexist.
No. He's not smacking me on the ass and going, Oye, mamita!
Oh, that makes me miss your abuelo.
You want to see real sexism? Be a woman in the Army, okay? You got a 22-year-old white boy from South Carolina marching behind you going, is it hot out here or is it you? Of course it was hot out there. It was a freaking desert. But you want to know how I dealt with that bobo? By being a better soldier than him. And eventually that's how they saw me, not as a woman at all.
Mike Royce, you did a great show called Unlisted that was set in the world of active military personnel who were not in combat and their families and so forth. And I wonder when you were making One Day at a Time, did you decide to bring that context, that military context, into the picture for Justina Machado's character?
Well, it started with Norman. The first day we met with Norman, he's like, we have to do something about the VA. I mean, that's where Norman comes from, more than just, any kind of micromanaging or anything like that. He has an idea of something he wants to tackle. And then how can we do it? How can we work it out? And at first it was going to be the ex-husband and he still is a veteran. But we started talking and thinking, there's no reason not to make our main character also a veteran, because there are so many different nuanced veteran stories across America, especially over the last 15, 20 years with our approach to warfare. There are millions of these people with millions of stories to tell. And
our approach to warfare being frequent?
Yes. And relentless.
Extensive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the awareness now of what warfare does to people is obviously a lot greater. And rectifying that has not really been the focus of the government. It probably has been more than it was in the past, but obviously there's a long way to go. So it's a real issue, and we wanted to make sure it felt organic to this family. So it gave her a real deep biography that we can illustrate, and at the same time, it's not a show about every episode isn't about veterans issues. We can pick our spots and when they're relevant to the family.
Were there things that you had to that you were worried you were going to get wrong? When you were taking on all of these capital I issues, underrepresented groups, so on and so forth?
Well, with my encyclopedic knowledge of Latino culture, I felt we were in good hands.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yes. The stuff for me that I really wanted to get right is that I'm not gay and Mike's not gay. And so we wanted to, having such a rich relationship with so many gay and lesbian people in my life, I felt a great responsibility to do right by them. And so that's where we are so grateful and lean on the women in our room who did so much to fill in where Mike and I could not on those stories, because we really, to tell a coming out story, to do that in a way that would really reach people and start conversation, that was something we really took seriously and wanted to represent.
For sure. And I mean, the whole, and any issue that we talked about on the show, it really all gets back to specificity. And I think it really gets back to who you're populating your room with. They need to be talented writers, but they should also bring in a lot of different points of view. And that's where diversity, which is for some reason a dirty word now, is super duper important. But the way we felt like, okay, we're in the right direction is that we're taking, people weighed in from their specific points of view, having lived as a Latino, as a woman, for that matter, even as a white guy sometimes.
Yes, yes.
And as a gay person, and so we're taking, these are real people with real experiences. So we try to, keep it there.
Well, Mike, Gloria, thank you so much for taking all this time to be on Bullseye. It was really great to get to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Gloria Calderon Kellett and Mike Royce from last year. Find One Day at a Time on Netflix now. The second season is even better than the first.